Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Today is March 20th and it is known around the world as the International Day of Happiness. It's a day of celebration that was started by the United Nations in 2011. The goal is to counter economic growth with an eye to the health and well-being of the individuals in that economy. One group that's based in Montpelier wants people across the country to start thinking seriously about happiness and well-being. Rebecca Gollin and video editor Marco Ayala show us.
There's a movement underway that aims to help people be happier.
G&H's USA has been able to grow.
Ginny Sassaman is the president of Gross National Happiness USA. The group is based in Montpelier. Their mission is to increase personal happiness and collective well-being by changing how we measure progress and success.
One of the things that I like to help people consider is how do we personally shift from living sort of a gross national product or gross domestic product, growth economy, personal life. How can we shift to live more in harmony, more holistic? So both our personal happiness, but our personal happiness as it's connected with the community and the broader collective.
It's a principle that was started in Bhutan and continues to be a guiding ideology of the government there. The basic idea is that the collective health and happiness of a nation is just as important as its economic well-being. That's traditionally measured with indicators such as median income, poverty rates, and labor force participation.
My understanding has been that the way we've developed ourselves, our economy here, especially in the United States, it feels like it's somewhat transitioned so that we're more in service to the economy than the economy being in service to us. We only get that happiness if we're economically productive. That's the shift that I think Gross National Happiness really helps us look at that and say it's not just about what we produce, because if we're only focused on that, it's very limiting. It doesn't take into consideration externalities that we create, pollution, social issues that we create, wealth inequality, etc. And Gross National Happiness provides a much broader lens to be able to look at all those things, at least from a economic and an overall society level on how we're doing.
Brian Kaminer advises people on impact investing, which means that he helps them align their money and their values.
What I've come to know, believe, and try to speak to other people about is that there are limits to growth, and that the economy really should be in service to us, should be in service to our broader quality of life, our happiness.
The group hopes to engage the public at large, both nationally and right here in Vermont.
So one of the things that can happen at the local level is helping to educate people about G&H and about how to incorporate G&H in your own life. But there's also policy things that can happen. Municipalities could adopt the G&H framework for decision making. So for example, instead of just voting on something like this is good for jobs, but take a look, okay, so it's good for jobs, but is it good for the environment? Is it good for our community vitality? Is it good for our mental health? Is it good for our physical health?
So for me, G&H, having been to Bhutan for 5 or 6 times, is really about essence. And as we say, we live our astrology. We live and we share, we teach what we most need to learn.
On this night, the group welcomed an ambassador for Gross National Happiness to Montpelier for a talk.
I went to Bhutan for the first time with my wife 7 years ago now, 6-7 years ago. And I've now returned 5 or 6 times. And on the second trip, I got a great opportunity to do some photography and painting, it started to snowball, exhibitions, and eventually I was asked to do a painting of the Queen Mother, and then I ended up painting the King, and the Prime Minister then invited me to come back and present the pictures, and I, after attending a number of Gross National Happiness conferences as well, was asked to become, a cultural ambassador for Gross National Happiness by the Prime Minister and by Dr. Samdhu Chhetri, who was running the Gross National Happiness Centre in Bhutan at the time. Putting oneself in the shoes.
George Lewis is an artist, philosopher, and healer who gives talks around the world, sharing the spiritual side of the movement.
Perhaps even more. Gross National Happiness is a conduit. It's a conduit to a higher level of consciousness. It's a system which measures our relationships. It measures our environment. It's respective of our environment. So Gross National Happiness for me is a wonderful organisation to work with, which celebrates humanity writ large, as opposed to how much I can trade with you and how much profit I can make, without really taking in the other aspects of life.
Recently, the group teamed up with several partners, including the Center for Rural Studies at the University of Vermont, to conduct a survey of Vermonters' happiness and well-being. It was a follow-up to an initial survey in 2013.
Basically, the questions ask respondents their overall well-being on a variety of characteristics related to community well-being, environmental health and well-being, trust in governance, trust in neighbors and in local businesses, for example.
The data is then combined into a total number for an overall score of Vermonters' well-being.
So in 2013, we conducted the study and we were able to compare our results in the state of Vermont to some national level results on overall happiness and well-being. And we found that indeed Vermonters tended to be a little bit happier than people across the country or U.S. citizens in general. And in 2017, we found that Vermonters' self-perceived well-being had decreased slightly, if at all. So we're able to begin tracking these data over time and using those data points to see if Vermonters are happier, getting happier, or are sort of experiencing a decline in happiness overall.
Conducting a survey of happiness can be tricky because it's so subjective.
Asking someone how they felt last week is a lot different than knowing what their median income was last year, and we recognize that. But again, if we can ask people how they felt last week enough times and over time, we can develop a more rich understanding.
The goal is that over time, the results of these surveys will help researchers and policymakers know more about what's affecting the people and communities they serve.
We do hope that in the future we would be able to use indicators like these alternative well-being indicators to really better understand the conditions that are going on in communities and better understand some of the factors that are beyond economic factors or more traditional factors, understand what's really impacting people's lives in a more complete, rich picture.
Gross national happiness, in a way, is a conduit towards the new paradigm. It doesn't stop with gross national happiness because it's not national anyway, it's global.
The gross national happiness provides a vehicle for us to really broaden the discussion, and it's a wonderful engagement point, and it gives it does a great job of holding space in which people can begin to think differently on what it means to be happy.
Helping people think differently about what it means to be happy, and providing a new framework for personal and community health and well-being in Vermont and beyond. It's a new way to measure happiness and hopefully increase it for everyone. In Montpelier, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thank you, Rebecca. Michael Mosher joins me now in the studio. Michael works for the UVM Center for Rural Studies, where he is the coordinator for the Vermont State Data Center. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've recently been asked to join the board of Gross National Happiness USA. What do you hope to see out of this connection?
Yeah, thanks. So ideally, being a board member of that national organization that's based here in Vermont will allow me to have a place from which to continue the research that we've done. We've done a couple of these statewide research projects in Vermont, and we would like to expand that to other places and among other populations as you know, time moves forward.
And so how does the Vermont Happiness and Wellbeing Survey fit into the Vermont State Data Center and what they do?
Sure. So the State Data Center works with census data and other Vermont-centric data sets. We collect data, we curate those data, and we make them accessible to Vermonters. We conduct some education and outreach around those indicators as well. So we really help people to find and use data to better understand Vermont communities, and these happiness and well-being data are accentuate that.
Do you think that there are more communities that are interested in this kind of information as far as, you know, quality of life issues? I mean, it used to be called quality of life, but now I guess it's happiness.
Well, there are a lot more communities that are undertaking to sort of identify and track indicators to see whether it's quality of life or whatever you want to call it. There's a myriad of indicators that we can look at, and communities are more and more interested about those indicators. So these just provide additional indicators for us to track and follow over time.
Has the Gross National Happiness USA conducted its happiness and well-being surveys in other states?
So not to my knowledge at this time in the way that we have. The way that we've done it is random samples of the population, looking to mirror the population demographics that we're working with, so we're getting valid results that are representative to the entire population. And as far as I know, that's not happened in another U.S. state. We're looking to do that. We're always looking for partners. We may work with populations within the state of Vermont as well, specific populations, perhaps elders, for example, or others. And then on the international level, this work is happening in other places in other countries and has been for years. Canada, Brazil, and I believe some municipalities, the city of Seattle has worked on with these indicators as well.
And so how does Gross National Happiness USA hope to use the information from the survey?
Sure. So again, I would say one of the overarching concepts is to really advance this paradigm of thinking about population well-being as perhaps more important than a rate of economic activity as an indicator for overall well-being. And so, having data in place enables us to then have those conversations and integrate those conversations into more traditional indicator conversations.
Because we're so hardwired to believe that, your happiness is tied into your economic situation, or your success is tied into that.
Yeah, we have, if you think about it that way, we have a fairly limited set of indicators that we can use, that we do traditionally use, and so this broadens out that set a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Through your work at the UVM Center for Rural Studies, you are the coordinator for the Vermont State Data Center, which just wrapped up its annual Vermonter poll.
Yes.
And you're still tallying the results, but any initial observances that you can share with us?
Yeah, so one thing that we ask every year is, what's the biggest challenge facing Vermont in the coming decade? And over time, we've seen that we've been running this survey for over 30 years in the state of Vermont, and over time we've seen sort of some ebb and flow and some of the challenges that Vermonters are seeing. But in the most recent effort, climate change has really sort of risen to the top over some of the more traditional challenges that are being faced. We also ask folks, we've started asking Vermonters, what's the most what's the greatest opportunity we have? What's our greatest strength in the state of Vermont? And that's been really interesting. We've only done that for a couple of years, but we're seeing that people in Vermont really value our small communities, our rural nature, and the strength of connections within our communities. And that's some very powerful information that we're working with.
And how can people find out more about Gross National Happiness USA?
Sure. Well, they can go to the website gnhusa.org. Which is up on the screen, which is useful, and just Google searching and finding out there's lots of different organizations that are involved in this across the country and internationally, and just do a little research and see what's going on out there.
Well, Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.